Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm going to quickly do an analysis of your essay, and it was about the inspector calls. Now, I've not actually read the essay, so it's kind of going to be my quick thoughts as I'm reading your paper. So I'm going to be looking for the paper now, sharing it on the screen. Okay, so you should be able to see that now. Let me increase the zoom. So, social responsibilities, you decided that was going to be the topic. In Priestley's political diatribe, the message of social responsibility is successfully conveyed due to the events that unfold. Each character is presented with their part and professed is to them. Okay, expression problem there. Okay, let me get my annotate. Professed is a good word, but it's a verb. So you can't say professed is. So you'll say something like each character is presented with their part and something how they participated in the barbaric demise of Eva Smith. Something is professed to them. Yeah, it's the other way around. Something is professed to them. Maybe this is. Yeah. Maybe you mentioned the inspector. You haven't mentioned the inspector. Each character is presented with their involvement in Eva Smith's in the barbaric demise of Eva Smith, right? So something like each character is presented with their involvement in the barbaric demise of Eva Smith and this is professed to them by the inspector. Is that what you meant? I'm not sure. So that's possibly what you were intimating. But change the size here again. Go here. Change the size. Don't think I can change the size once I've done it. Fair enough. Okay, so we just put that up there somewhere. Okay, then you okay, fine, that's an intro. In the stage directions, the lighting is quote pink and intimate. This links to the idea. So you should say which, because if you say this, you start the sentence. So that should be capital T, and pink and intimate should be the end. So you say which, isn't it? Links to the idiom about, right? Because the idiom isn't the word seeing things. The idiom is rose-tinted glasses. So about, the idiom about seeing things through, and then you'll have to put a speech mark here through, not just an inverted commas here, sorry, in rose-tinted glasses. So, okay, that's a bit big there. Smaller. And then you need to write the ES, glasses, not glass. Okay. And then there probably should be a full stop at this point. This, capital T, foreshadows the ignorance of the Burlings throughout the play, and it indicates how the Burlings and capitalists as a whole all refuse to take responsibility. Full stop. Yeah, now that is good. That is your explanation. But I feel like pink and intimate connects, you said links connects to rose tinted glasses. This foreshadows. You're missing something there. It's not being made clear. Yeah, I get that it links to the idea of rose tinted glasses, but what does that mean? So you're missing one sentence to say that they're in their comfort zone, that they're cozy, comfortable, enjoying themselves, right? They're enjoying their opulence, they're enjoying their the engagement, they're celebrating, they're in a celebratory mood. That's missed. You didn't mention that, so that is worth mentioning. Okay, where would you add that? Uh, you would add that here, yeah, or yeah, and then after you mention this, you then say this foreshadows the ignorance. Okay, but now we're wondering what is the ignorance? Like, I'm hoping you're going to now explain what exactly is the ignorance. Make it clear, right? Just because they're enjoying themselves, how is that equal? How does that equal that they are ignorant? So there's that needs to be explained. So I'm going to delete all the stuff here so that I can scroll down, because otherwise they're going to be in the way. Moving on. Didn't work. Okay. Okay. The lighting is also brighter and harder. So that's another device there. Let me see if I can. Yeah, okay, that's fine there. So let's now do another tick. That's another quote, which emphasizes. Remember, I've noticed what you do is you say the something something quote. This emphasize, but this emphasis is an indicator that we are on another sentence. So therefore, that should be a capital T and there should be a full stop over here. Capital T here and a full stop over there. Alternatively, if you want to keep it one sentence, and I think it should be, don't say this, say which. Which emphasizes, yeah, the lighting is also bright and harder. When you say it is also, I think what you mean is it becomes brighter and harder once the inspector arrives, right? So you're kind of missing that. So it feels like you're missing something there. Not is, will be, once the inspector arrives. So you've got to mention the inspector. You've got to connect this brighter and harder once the inspector arrives. And this emphasizes how the Berling's sins. Okay, Berling's. Now remember, this paper has VSPAG, vocabulary, spelling, punctuation, grammar. Punctuation says that if you're talking about the sins that belongs to the Berlings, you have to apostrophe after the S to indicate the sins belong to all of the Berlings. Because if you put the apostrophe before the S, you're talking about one Berling, okay? But you're talking about all of them. Their sins will be exposed due to their blindness from taking responsibility. Finally, you've connected it now to responsibility in a clearer way, that they are not taking responsibility, but again, just a little bit responsibility about what? They're not taking responsibility in their involvement with Eva Smith's death. So you have to make that bit clear. Now, I tried to amend your beginning, and had you done that, then it maybe you don't need to mention the full sentence here. So it kind of depends on how it reads. Right, you put a full stop, which is the right thing to do here, and therefore you are allowed to start with this allows Priestley to portray the Berling family as a malignant capitalist. Capitalist is singular, but you talk about the whole Berling family as malignant capitalists. So you have to put the S, I believe, here, right? Okay, and get rid of the A. Okay, so you have to try to be precise with your expression to maximize the VSPAG, 8 marks. Right, so furthermore, okay, good. This is nice. So you're not elaborating. Arthur is seated at one end, his wife at the other. Okay, so that's another quote. Now, my concern, however, is you're still focusing on the stage directions and you haven't talked about the rest of Act 1 or Act 2 or Act 3. So the question is, are you taking too long on just the first initial stage directions? That is a major concern at right now. Because within the first paragraph, you don't want to just focus on literally the opening. You want to get to the meat of the beginning, is how I'm feeling. So I am a little bit concerned. I will put a tick to say, well, we have evidence here. Priestley cleverly positions the Burlings away from each other to, you don't need this is, just to indicate that the Burlings are all disconnected and divided, which is the opposite of one of the main signs of a socialist. Okay, possibly. Yeah, because if you take it that way, if you're going to read it this way, what you need is you need to connect the idea of disconnection, right, with individualism. So I need to see the word individualism, that they are individuals. They prioritize capitalist way. Their system, the method, focuses on being individualistic, as opposed to the main signs of a socialist. Now, what's going to happen here is I will now be thinking to myself, wait, what is a socialist? I'm hoping you're going to define it. If you don't, there's a problem there, because you can't just bring in the term socialist and, in fact, capitalist without explaining in one phrase or turn of phrase or sentence the definition. So I'm hoping you're going to do that, but assuming you haven't done that, then that's the development point. Okay. What can we do now? So let's carry on moving. In Act 1, Mr. Burling blatantly refuses to take responsibility, again, about what? Responsibility about what? So each time you're saying the word responsibilities, which is good, you're linking it back to the question, but you're not saying what the responsibility is. Okay. So if you don't mention it here, what the responsibility is, then certainly mention it here. If you do mention it here, you might not need to mention it here. He mentions that if you don't come hard on some people, they'll soon ask for the earth. Now, you didn't put that in speech marks, but it does sound like a quote. And what you could have done is in order to kind of grab it as a quote, instead of, if you don't quite remember all of the quote, that's fine. If you don't come hard on some people, they'll soon ask for the earth. You could have done it that way. Put those as your evidence. This accentuates how Mr. Burling. Okay, by the way, let me quickly tick, or let me do a different sign. I'll do heart for good words. So you had malignant over here, which is a good word. And now you have accentuates. Okay. So these are signs of increased vocabulary or extended vocabulary. So we need this to be consistent. Okay. But the problem that pulling you back is your expression sometimes, and the whole, these words that you're missing, it doesn't gel. You're forgetting full stops, etc. So that needs to be improved. Where are we? This accentuates how Mr. Burling's mind is fixated upon his reputation, and therefore he switches to a defensive tone. Okay, good, yes. So that's your example of his defensiveness, but have you explained fully why? So reputation is good. So let me just do a quick tick there. And defensive tone, well, that's language, but it's still good. Chuck that in there. This, combined with Mr. Burling's authority, so you're missing the punctuation. Remember, the major problem with a lot of these essays is no one's doing punctuation, apostrophes. Mr. Burling's authority allows him to do what he wants, and this is made even easier for him. Delete all this. Even easier for him too much. When is it made easier for him? as in 1912, there were no workers there were no workers to protect the working class. No workers. There were there were few laws. I think what you meant is few laws. All right, to protect the working class, which allows. Remember, you could do that. So if you want to carry this on, you would say which. If you want to do this, you have to do a full stop before and then capital T, which allows Priestley to portray capitalists again, either capitalism, the idea of capitalism, or the capitalists, because there's not one capitalist. Portray capitalists in a selfish and egotistical way. Yeah, in a selfish, can't say in a selfish, in a selfish what? In a selfish way, an egotistical way. Got it? Bring that closer there. But at this point, because if you said which over here, this is where you can say this. So we'll put a little full stop here, and then we'll start with this is contrasting to the inspector's adamant belief. Adamant is a good word. That justice will be served through fire, blood, and anguish. Okay, so we have the famous quote at the very end. So what you've done, you've started at the beginning, yeah, then you've just gone right to the end. Well, that's because you're trying to focus on the what's the name? The inspector. Justice will be served through fire, blood, and anguish. Okay, have you explained what that means? Now, if you haven't, the point is, what was the benefit of this mentioning that right now? Because I can see you're going to carry on talking about Berling. So it might be that you're hinting something, but it feels like you need to make a decision. Because by fire, blood, and anguish, and you mentioned justice, the point is that those that are unjust, those that are selfish, those that are independently minded, they don't help the situation. They just make things worse. So if you don't learn this lesson, which the older generation are loath to do, in fact, they believe that there's another lesson to learn, which is one about not believing about community and all that nonsense, and rather to look after yourself and your family, and to try to increase in rank and position and power. And how do we know that they think they know what the answer is? Is because Berlin keeps telling everybody that he's a hard-headed, practical man of business. So he's trying to say that I know, and that's the actual lesson. The fact that the inspector was a hoax means that that Eric should learn his lesson in the fact that he should not have stolen the money. And that was the reason why he wanted to cover it up. Okay. So what do we do with this fire, blood, and anguish? I feel you've not explained it. Yes, you're kind of hinting that there is another perspective, but I think you needed to connect this to just a phrase about we don't live alone, that quote, or the idea of there are millions and millions of Eva Smiths. Whichever, if you do it that way, you will have to explain and go into some detail. So I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to hint it and then move on. I'm just flagging the questions that's in my mind. I feel that the inspector side so far is completely not developed. But then your argument might be, because in your second paragraph or so that you're prioritizing Mr. Burling. Mr. Burling mentions that he wants to work together for lower costs and higher prices. Okay, so that is good. This highlights, good, and you got the this in the right place, how the capitalists, and now you say capitalists, which is good. But then it's an apostrophe because the passion belongs to the capitalists, and if it's about belonging, there has to be an apostrophe, and it goes after the S because it's not one capitalist, it's all of them. The capitalist's passion for money is a can't read what that says, purblind quest for materialistic objects. Strips capitalists, I think, of any type of empathy and by extension, responsibility. Right, yes, but empathy about who? And this is better, definitely, compared to the other types where you just mention responsibility, but here, or lack of, you're now connecting it to they don't have any empathy. So this is good. And they're only after profit. Okay, but you didn't say profit, you said materialistic objects. Fair enough, but obviously chuck in the word profit. As Mr. Burling has no issue with buying workers for lower class from the lower classes, I think that's what he meant. For lower class, no, from the lower classes. Yeah, then what? This shows, okay, this putting this here is okay because you've got the word as at the beginning. So when you have as at the beginning, then you can, with a comma, carry on with this. As Mr. Burling has no issue with buying workers from the lower classes, this shows how that works. How the older generation, that's good, you mentioned older generation, are refusing to take responsibility due to the arrogance and tradition that is embedded into them. So if something is embedded within them, not into them, within them. Okay, can you see the weakness? The strength is, yes, you're talking about individualism, although I don't think you use the word individualism, but you did say selfish. You are talking about materialism. You also add the word wealth. You mentioned capitalists, but you're not really explain what is capitalism in detail. You've hinted at something to do with context because you said in 1912 there were no, I mean, you said workers to protect the working class, although I think you meant laws. But this would have been also a good time to mention the miners' strikes and the rise of popular movements protesting from the poorer classes, and they were getting more and more frustrated with how the ruling class were exploiting them. So we need the word exploitation, because that's connected to the not only not taking responsibility, but actually using their power to harm. Yeah. Taking responsibility kind of implies that you already know you're doing something wrong and you're kind of owning up to it, but they're not taking responsibility. In fact, they are promoting their way of being, way of life, which is this capitalist and greedy thing. Right, so let me just delete all of this, clear all drawings and scroll up. Okay, now we are moving to the middle. So do you feel you have sufficiently explained the beginning? From the point of view of capitalism, yes. But you've just hinted something about socialism, but you've not explained what socialism is, what fire, blood, and anguish means. So that's the weakness so far. In Act 2, while Sheila is being interviewed, she mentions these girls aren't cheap labor. They are people. So that's the wrong they are. Yeah, so you have to get this one right. They're people, probably. They are people. Okay, the full stop. So that's good. Full stop, capital T. This accentuates. Yeah, so because you've used this word already, I feel that it would have been better to use a different one. I don't know if you've used emphasizes, which you probably have. Demonstrates. Demonstrates. Okay. This demonstrates how Sheila is taking responsibility. Yeah, again, connect it to Eva. You're kind of missing Eva out. You're not really explaining the problem is all around Eva. So imagine you're writing a whole essay and you're not explaining who is Eva Smith, what happened to Eva Smith. So that is important. This demonstrates how Sheila is taking responsibility, which is the first sign of a socialist. Not sure about that. It's not really, it's the first sign of a socialist. It's the first sign that she has socialist or socialist leanings, or that first sign she is leaning towards the perspective of the inspector. Now, the inspector, you can say, is the mouthpiece of socialism, just like he's the mouthpiece of the inspector, of Priestley, and we know Priestley is a socialist. But to say that the inspector is a socialist or Sheila is a socialist is too strong, because nowhere does the inspector say, hello there, I am teaching you about socialism. Do you ascribe to socialism? And then Sheila going, yeah, I think I'm a socialist. So socialist is a term. What he's doing is he's describing the traits of socialism that the people are taking on, but no one's explicitly saying, hello, I'm a socialist. I hope you can see that. So first sign of having tendencies or socialist tendencies, something like this, or leanings. So there, I'm just going to put a little scribble, which means the idea of tendencies or leanings. Okay. Typically in Edwardian society, the lower classes, not the lower class, the lower classes, yeah, were seen as workers who held no value. Okay, you kind of got a number of different things going on here. They do have value. Their value is you're just a cog in a machine. So it's not that they have no value. Their value is only to serve the interests of the ruling class. Their value is only in being a cog in the machine. They don't have any inherent value. And I think that's what you're probably suggesting. The lower classes were seen as workers who held no intrinsic value, you could say. But then you have to elaborate. Their value was simply that they were being exploited, being used to serve the interests of the rich. That bit is missing. Then you suddenly switch to the suffragette movement. Now, the suffragette movement is specifically a feminist entity. But when you mention the workers could be male or female. So there seems to be a mismatch between your point and your example. Because you're talking about Edwardian society generally, men and women, the lower classes were workers who had no value, despite the suffragette movement rising at the time. So this is a not clear explanation of context. Talking about the workers on the one hand and the suffragettes on the other, it's confusing. Talking about the workers was the one from the previous one when you talk about Berling. Now, because you're talking about Sheila, you want to bring in suffragettes. But really what you're trying to say here, the suffragette movement, the idea here is bringing voice to the women. And the women are, in European society, mind you, giving them a voice. And the suffragette movement was also about workers as well, but how does that connect to Eva? Because Eva is working. So what's your, I'm trying to understand what your point is about the suffragette movement. Sheila is corrigible and responsibility admits to her part of the blame. Okay, this sounds a little bit unclear. Yeah, so I think this needs, if you want to rephrase this section here, that'd be better. This is further seen when she says, comma, why, you fool, he knows, you'll see, you'll see. Sheila's good. You put the apostrophe here. Use of repetition. Repetition has got two E's. Repetition. Right. In what's that? Indicates the fact that she's the first from the Burlings to acknowledge judgment is inevitable. Yeah, I don't know why you've got a comma there. First to acknowledge judgment is inevitable. You'll see, you'll see. Yeah, okay. Put a little quote tick here. Moreover, as she calls Gerald a fool, this shows, again, because you said as, you're allowed to then say this with no full stop, shows how she's breaking the social norms at the time, as it would be considered unthinkable to question a man. Right. So this is about the idea of letting the women have a voice, which I think was your point about the suffragette movement, but you it wasn't clear. So really, it's about women having a voice. Now, the suffragette movement, I feel like you need to elaborate a little bit more. You need another word or two, or sentence or two, just to explain that you had Emily Pankhurst and her works, and maybe also the fact that, to the extent that one of the suffragettes felt so passionately about this, that they went in front of the king's horse in the race, so to kind of emphasize or showcase the plight of the women who felt either oppressed or exploited, and they're making a stand. Similarly, you see how you have to make it clear the context point, then you move to how does that connect to the play. Sheila is making a stand. So do you see the point there? That's what is missing. Lastly, okay, let me just delete everything. Clear all drawings. Lastly, in Act 3, Sheila mentions, okay, so it's nice that you're talking about lastly in Act 3 because you're focusing this paragraph on Sheila and you're seeing the development of Sheila. Sheila mentions bitterly, I suppose we're all nice people now. Now, I'm not sure if that's a full stop there or not, but then there should be a capital this. Okay, this emphasizes how Sheila is still not satisfied with the situation. Again, what's the situation? The situation has not been made clear. Okay. Although the inspector is gone, you got to rephrase that. Although the inspector had left earlier or something, she still feels the regret in herself. Regret about what? Okay. And this makes Sheila the proxy of the inspector. No, the only way Sheila becomes a proxy of the inspector is that she is conveying whatever the inspector has come in to convey. You've not made it clear what is the inspector's message. What has he said? How is he pushing his view? What is his view? After you've done that and he's gone, that's when you can mention that Sheila is the proxy of the inspector and pushing his perspective. We are missing in your account what is the inspector's perspective. Okay, the phrasing is good, but you've not demonstrated this point. Okay, so that it needs some thought there, and therefore, what's that? Resemble socialism, therefore resemble socialism. Now I think that ending doesn't connect. I don't know how. Yeah, I hope you can see that. How does she resemble socialism? You've not defined socialism. Sheila is a proxy of Inspector, but you don't know in what way does Inspector promote socialism. You have not established this. So you've done a good amount on capitalism, how it's selfish and so on, but we don't see the other side. It has not been explained thoroughly, I feel. Next, let's move on. Clear, is it clear drawings? Yes. I think we are approaching the last page. I think I might be wrong. No, so 2 pages away from the end. I'll try and speed up. Okay. In Act 2, okay, good. So you're getting another evidence of another character. Eric also mentions, why shouldn't they try for higher wages? Now, before you do a quote, and if it's within your sentence, so the quote is embedded in the sentence, you do need a comma here. Then you start your quote, okay? And it should be capital. Every time somebody speaks, first time, first word, first letter, capital. Why shouldn't they try for higher wages? Is that a question? Because I've got a funny feeling that's probably a question mark. Okay, so these things, you see the punctuation, capitalization consistently. I'm having to correct it. You have to correct it yourself. So you need to finish maybe 2 minutes early and then read through and spot them and correct them. Why shouldn't they try for higher wages? So now it's looking at Eric. This is the first reasonable and ethical concern that Eric raises, highlighting his character development. Remember, you've not really explained how Eric was. Yeah? You're just gone straight into that he's developed, but we don't know from what. And then full stop. Okay, this is not bad. I like the way you said, I like the phrasing. But so I'm going to put a little tick there. This quote, again, capital T, also signifies Eric's growing allegiance with the laborers. Whose side? The laborers' side, so apostrophe there, of the conflict. This emphasizes how Eric's maturation allows himself to be unblinded by his father's egotistical beliefs. Father's apostrophe. Okay. Eric could also be developing responsive views due to him being distant from his father, which allows J.B. Priestley to demonstrate how capitalism will lead to the destruction of equality. Wait a minute. I thought you were going to say lead to the destruction of the family, because you were talking about the relationship between Eric and the father. And I can see why you say Priestley to demonstrate how capitalism will lead to the destruction of. Just that last word, I don't know, I'm not clear where equality, this is the first time you're mentioning equality. Where does equality come into it? Because it didn't feel like you were talking about equality in this paragraph. Are you saying Eric and his father should be on an equal level? Is that what you mean? It's not clear. What is the equality you're referring to there? So put a question mark there. Additionally, Eric also mentions, and there should be a comma there, that's the hellish thing. Okay. And I think you need an and there. And he says this. Whilst remembering Eva. Okay. So you connected to Eva, but you're not explained anything about what is his involvement with Eva. This emphasizes how he genuinely loved Eva and therefore he regrets and becomes remorseful, right? So by saying that's the hellish thing, he says whilst remembering Eva or trying to remember, maybe. But fine, let's assume, let's accept remembering Eva. This proves that he loved Eva. How does that prove? I think you're missing something. You need to say that he feels bad. He's frustrated with himself. That's why he said that's the hellish thing. So once you say that, then you link it to he is demonstrating remorsefulness. Eric accepts the responsibility, and in this way, yeah, but where's the evidence that he actually said that he accepts responsibility? He said at the beginning why shouldn't they try for higher wages? Any other quotes? That's the hellish thing. But when he said that's the hellish thing, I think he was talking about he can't quite remember what he did to Eva Smith. That's the hellish thing. That's the hellish thing does not show that he is remorseful, does it? Um, and where's the evidence that he's accepted responsibility? Priestley demonstrates how even the most flawed characters are corrigible. This is further viewed when we see that Eric steals the money from his wealthy capitalist father and provides S for Eva Smith. In this way, Priestley attempts to reinforce the idea of socialism. Okay, so now I'm thinking, is socialism about stealing from wealthy capitalist fathers? Do you see where I'm going with this? Your conclusion, the last line is it's a jump from what you just said. I don't know what is the idea of socialism still not being made clear. It's about community, social mindfulness. We are all connected. We are members of one body. This is the idea, and it's opposed to atomized society, individualism, right? And subtly indicates towards the socialist belief of equality. Okay, so now we've got equality again. Okay, the only thing I can think of when you say equality, you mean that he wants a classless society. He does not want upper class, ruling class, and the lower working class. So he wants to eliminate this. When I say he, Priestley wants to eliminate this, so he's using the inspector to try and push the idea that stop being so high and mighty. We are actually all connected. Okay. Um, yeah. So what you're missing with the word equality is this is about class. Okay, it's not clear that you're talking actually about class in this paragraph. You didn't use the word class once. You are using equality, but it's not clear what the equality you're referring to. Okay, let me delete what I have here, click all drawings, and move on. However, Mrs. Burling, okay, now we are getting to the flip side of Mr. Burling. Mr. Burling, who is part of the older generation, refuses to take responsibility. Again, responsibility about what? She states, quote, I, unlike the other three, although you didn't say the word the, I, unlike other three, I haven't done anything wrong. Well, I think maybe it's unlike, yeah, the other three, I haven't done anything wrong. So I don't think it's, yeah, okay, fine. So let's put that's a tick. So you've got the evidence here. Capital T. This declarative highlights how blunt and confident. Confidence is the thing, but this is an adjective describing Mrs. Burling. How confident Mrs. Burling is, and she believes she has done nothing wrong, and has, and therefore has, yeah, no reason to take responsibility. In this way, Priestley suggests that due to the patriarchy, patriarchal, because patriarchy is the noun, patriarchal is the adjective. So AL, not a Y, get rid of the Y. Patriarchal society at the time where women were seen as second-class citizens. Wait, your sentence again. In this way, Priestley suggests that due to the patriarchal society of the time, yeah, where women were seen as second-class citizens, this has led to Mrs. Burling taking the view of her husband and superior Mr. Burling. Oh, yeah. Okay, taking on his perspective. Okay. Arthur Burling also refuses to take responsibility. Okay, so I feel here you've not explained what was Mrs. Burling's role in terms of not taking responsibility. You need to mention that she was in the charity. She did not give aid. In fact, she took took efforts to persuade the other people in the panel, right? Because she was prejudiced. There was a quote, prejudice against Eva's case. She ensured that the others agreed with her. As in, she took the trouble to do that. So she did not lend a hand. Okay, she felt Eva Smith was undeserving. I think that was one of the words. Why? She had a pride. Girls of that sort, of that class, girls of that class, something like this, implying that she has a really negative idea of these working classes, that they are, and she doesn't trust Eva. Now, you could argue that there's a reasonable reason as to why Mrs. Burling can't take what Eva is saying seriously because Eva did get found out to be lying, but it's the idea that she doesn't really get a chance, and so that's the priority here. And then finally, after knowing all the facts, she still is adamant that she's done nothing wrong because she does not see that she has. You want to emphasize how once she realizes Eric is involved and that's her son, her tone changes. So suddenly she's very concerned, right? Why was she not concerned before? So the only reason why she's concerned now because it's her son, and that's connected to her selfishness, and that's what that exposes. So she's very decisive in saying I did nothing wrong, but once she realizes Eric was involved, then she realizes I did do something wrong. So how come she didn't notice that when it was Eva Smith, regardless of Eric's involvement? And that's the point that Priestley is kind of flagging. But here, what you do is it's almost like you finish with Mrs. Burling, so you're now going back to Mr. Burling. After Burling refuses to take responsibility when he finds out there is a chance the inspector is a hoax. Yeah. He says, by jingo, a fake. The exclamation mark emphasizes both the growing tension in his self as well as the relief of not being involved, as Mr. Burling is more worried about his reputation than Eva's death. There, it is the first time, I think this is the first time, you mentioned the demise, but the demise could be, does not necessarily mean death. It could be downfall, right? So demise is more vague language. Okay, so this is the first time you've mentioned Eva's death. Let's move on. Okay. Last page, I believe. And scroll down. In Act 3, Mr. Burling bellows at Eric. Okay, it looks like you've gone back to Mr. Burling, which is curious, telling him, you're the one I blame for this. You damned fool. So now we're talking about blaming. Okay. The curse, damned, has connotations of being religiously cursed, which is ironic because you're trying to carry on the sentence. as Mr. Berling is Eric's father, making Mr. Berling responsible for both his and Eric's actions. Wait, why is Mr. Berling, just because Mr. Berling is Eric's father, how does that make Mr. Berling responsible? Because isn't Eric old enough to take responsibility? So a little bit, something is missing in your explanation there. However, as Mr. Berling's selfish soul is greedy in nature, he, as a capitalist, puts the money before the individual. Evidence. So you've made a claim there. Where's your evidence? You should say something like, for example, when he does such and such. Or a quote, one of these. Mr. Berling shouting at his son, the abrupt moment the inspector leaves insinuates at how Mr. Berling and capitalists as a whole will never learn. Yeah, although never learn as in never take responsibility. They never learn the lesson. But is it clear what the lesson was? So what was the lesson is not, I don't feel like you've made that clear. What was the lesson? Okay. Okay, let me actually delete everything here so I can scroll up to the end of the page. In Act 3, the inspector provides a final climactic message urging the contemporary audience to be assiduous and form a socialist government. Yeah, I think the idea of socialist government is priestly. The inspector doesn't say that they should form a socialist government. The inspector says that they are members of one community, one body. So we have to be community minded. Who is talking about socialist government would be the priestly. Okay. So that just the subtle sort of difference there. After World War II and a period of uncertainty, yeah, that would be a nice link to the radio broadcast in J.B. Priestley made on the BBC, talking about the we have to work towards a great quote, great communal task, where he felt that we should need to bring about a socialist Britain where there's no classes of higher rank and lower rank, but we're all working together, just like the spirit of the English fighting in World War II against these forces out there. The upper class, lower classes were working together against a common enemy. Okay, and now that the war's over, what do we do with our society? So he is talking to his audience of his time in 1945, trying to create a vision of a possible socialist Britain. Really is hinting at what they should do by emphasizing the era of the previous age, and he picks 1912 as the kind of the most the kind of pinnacle of a very classist society, and identifying that do we want to go back to that? That needs to be made clear. So after World War II, the period of uncertainty, the inspector is intransigent that justice will be served in fire, blood, and anguish. You kind of mentioned this already earlier, but the first time you didn't explain it. Now I'm hoping you're going to explain this. This tricolon emphasizes the impact of capitalism and what will happen if we don't learn from our mistakes. But what kind of mistakes? The noun fire can be interpreted to show the refusal of taking responsibility. It spreads quickly, then harms everyone. Okay, that's a nice analysis there. The play is also set after World War II. You don't write World War II in this way. That's only for note taking. You have to write it in full. World, capital W, War, capital W, two, TWO, capital T, which adds gravitas to the inspector's message. Who is Priestley's mouthpiece? you got to be careful here because when you're saying gravitates to the inspector's message, the key noun is message, and the inspector is acting like an adjective describing the message. But the topic of this sentence is the message. Then you said, who is Priestley's mouthpiece? But the previous phrase, you're talking about the message, but here you're saying Priestley is the mouthpiece to the message. That is how it sounds like. I know you're talking about Priestley. So inspector is the mouthpiece to Priestley, right? But the way you phrased it sounds like the message, who is a person, is the mouthpiece of Priestley's. So you've got to rephrase that sentence. The inspector also says, quote, we are members of one body. Full stop. Because you can do a short sentence here. The collective pronoun urges the audience, good, to cooperate together and take responsibility. Yeah, so I feel like this should have been mentioned earlier. This quote can be interpreted to show how the human body is composed of many organs. If one slacks off, the entire system collapses. Likewise, we are all members of society and are one body. Yeah. Therefore, we should all take responsibility and avoid harming those around us. In this didactic masterpiece, J.B. Priestley successfully manages to shine a heroic light upon socialism and present to the audience the significance of social responsibility. Yeah, a short and sweet conclusion. That's fine. Also, you have a good word there, didactic, which is to say something which is being directly taught. Didactic is when it's for educational purposes. So in this educational masterpiece, that's what didactic means there, and that would work. Okay, so I've mentioned so many. I don't need to do an overall what went well and even better if, positives and negatives. I think I've given a lot of detail, and you can see again common issues. But what we could do, if I stop the share for a minute, or rather maybe do a new share, and quickly go to the mark scheme. What we can see then is, if we're trying to now identify where are we with this, really it's kind of, you have to have a think. Are we, you're nowhere near level 2, but let's just double check level 3. The response shows relevant personal response. The response has a developed personal response. I feel you've got a developed personal response. Alternatively, you have on the other side assured personal response, showing high level of engagement with the text. You do have a high level of engagement with the text, but the discerning choice of references, there's a kind of a yes and no there. If you go to the previous one, fully related to the text with well chosen references. So the references is certainly well chosen, with text that is focused supporting textual references, but your personal response is sound. So I think it's better than sound. Level 3, there's an appropriate critical style with comments showing sound interpretation with focus textual references. Is it focused textual references? Remember that sometimes things were a bit vague. Critical style is sustained, meaning you sound like an essay for at least 2 paragraphs. There are well-chosen developed interpretations. So this is a question mark there. Well-chosen references to text. So the references is not so much the problem. It's the idea of being focused, or sorry, your sound interpretation, or is it a developed interpretation, or do we have a discerning or perceptive understanding, a critical style that is developed with maturity, discerning. So is it discerning, like really well articulated and impactful. I don't feel you're quite there because there's so many things that I think was feeling was not quite clear, although you did have some detail. So detail pushes you into level 4. Sustained comment is offered on relevant context, or sound comment is offered on relevant context. So you did mention context a few times, but not much detail about the context. Um, so is it sustained? What would it be on the highest level? Understanding of relevant context is excellent. Yeah, I feel like there's things needed improvement. Your understanding of the context, sorry, the text and the context is integrated convincingly. There was interweaving between your point you're making and the context. That was true. So I think that was stronger, but your understanding is less demonstrated. So if I go back to this one, you have detailed awareness and the relationship between the text and the context is, yeah, I think you're kind of here. Relevant comment on the relationship between, no, I feel like it's more than a comment. So I feel overall we're moving in the level 4 territory, and I would put you mid to upper. So let's say mid would be 23, 24. I'd probably give it 24, possibly 25, right? Best case scenario, 25. Now, what about the VSPAG? Now, VSPAG, remember, high performance, learn a spell, punctuate with consistent accuracy, but there was not consistent accuracy. Consistent use of vocabulary, sentence structure, show effective control of meaning. Now, your vocabulary will be on, I think, on this level here. Let's give the vocabulary something like a 6 or a 7. Let's say best case scenario, let's say 7. That's just for vocabulary. But because of the punctuation and spelling, that will take you yeah, errors. Is it down here? No, let's be a bit more optimistic and say 3, right? So between 3 and 7, if we were to do a mean average, 3, 4, and 6, 5. So you'll probably get a 4 or 5. If I'm realistic, my gut feeling is actually a 4. But if you're being optimistic, it's 5. So what was that? That was 20, 24 or 25 here, plus 4 or 5 here, and that's kind of where we have it. I hope that was useful, inshallah. I think I've talked for a long time. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.